tell sometime.
There we go.
All right, so aloha kakakiaka. It's an honor to be with you all today on January 6th. Of course, a lot is happening in Washington, D.C., and a winter blizzard is just coming in. But what's super important, of course, while most people might think of just what happened 4 years ago with a direct challenge to our democracy, what was more significant, of course, is what happened uh, in 1941. On that day, Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave his Four Freedoms speech. And that really talked about an economic bill of rights, looking at economic, social, and cultural rights, a very important part of the International Bill of Rights was civil and political, plus economic, social, and cultural. So as we look at this important day of January 6th, and we kick off this year to launch the fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review of the United States, it's a great day to sort of reflect on that. If we looked at what happened just 4 years ago, you can really see a violent betrayal of what things should be, where we have really, in this case, a person trying to make sure that the civil and political rights are not enacted and carried through. In fact, Michael Beschloss said that it was a coup d'etat attempted by the president of the United States at that time. So, but that treacherous attack failed. But we definitely know, while some people say democracy persevered that day, we are coming up to one of the most challenging times in this country as we go forward. And it will be really an opportunity for us on November 10th of 2025 to frame where we are 1 year into this administration and what we need to do. So we know that January 6th was an attack on law and order. We know it was a huge example of a sacred space violated, and definitely authoritarianism versus democracy and freedom versus coercion, but also testing the fragility of democracy. What we didn't get into enough, though, and what we'll talk about, of course, is that economic, social, and cultural rights. And Roosevelt in 41, at his Four Freedom speech, he talked about freedom. Does anybody know the Four Freedom speech? Oh, I see Allison and Justine and a couple others, so that's great. Uh, that Four Freedom speech talked about two freedoms that very much deal with the civil and political, and two freedoms that very much deal with economic, social, cultural, right? Freedom of speech and freedom of worship, right? Pointing out the importance of those two sacred aspects of democracy, but then also freedom from fear and freedom from want. And that's looking at the economic, social, and cultural rights, which unfortunately we in the United States haven't officially recognized yet, and have not ratified the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Of course, on that front, we haven't ratified CEDAW for women's rights, and also ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Although in March, we will actually go to Geneva and report on the optional protocol of the Committee on the Rights of the Child for the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So a lot happening in this year. And that freedom from want is so crucial because it looks at a lot of the issues that we'll look at today, but also looks at the important issues of healthcare, of education, of housing, of all those important aspects that are just as important. And of course, what they talk about and what we're focusing on, rights of nature, rights of indigenous peoples, which are the ones that have really always been organized. If you look traditionally at human rights, they talk about different generations, which is really a false dichotomy, but they talk about civil and political being the first, second being economic, social, and cultural, enshrined in the ICESCR, third being sort of a collective rights, the rights of nature. Of course, we know environment is absolutely essential. If you don't think about the right to environment or think it's that important, we can all just try holding our breath for a little while on this beautiful morning in January and see how long that lasts. And of course, the right to water, absolutely crucial as well, as that's what our body needs to survive. So we'll be looking at the Universal Periodic Review, and I really see this as an interactive time together to discuss what matters most to you and how we can use this process of a Universal Periodic Review being hosted at the UN as a space for us really to grow a culture of human rights, but also contribute to building a movement for human rights in our communities, in our classrooms, in our city halls, and in our nation, and also around the world. Because the U.S. is involved in so many places, our UPR can actually look at that extraterritoriality element of the way that either corporations are involved or our military as well. So this Universal Periodic Review is a great opportunity to organize and coordinate campaigns that really matter most to you. That the UN is reviewing the US is important, but more importantly is utilizing this mechanism to build our collective movement. And it's an honor to
Joshua, if you could maybe explain a little bit more what the UPR process, what it is, because I don't know that if
I
everybody
was
in
about to
the
get to that.
there
This is
we
just
go.
the beginning. I don't think I've really talked. This is just starting in the morning, but thank you, Christina,
Thank
for
you.
talking there. What we're trying to do, of course, is we'll be spending this entire time explaining what the UPR is, and more importantly, how you can participate in this process. It is a process that basically will last from, there's 5 phases for the UPR, just to break it down in the most simplest way. The first phase is the one that we're starting today, and that's the preparation phase. That's explaining what is the UPR. So Christina's right on point to prompt me there. It's what is the UPR and how people can participate. It is educating about what one individual can do, but what a collective entity can also coordinate during that time. It's explaining the entire process of what the UPR is and is not, what it can and cannot do, but also noting the importance of the creativity that we all have and seeing what is possible and how we can move forward in the work that you hold dearly in your heart, and then coordinating from there throughout this entire process, from preparation in the first phase, which is mainly around education. The most important part in this part is education, to be able to know what your rights are, to be able to then take those rights that matter most to you and promote those to the top of the agenda for other countries as they look at the United States. And then to, what's super important is to be able to put in writing what you think matters most and how those issues that you care about and are very concerned about can be considered and even at the center of the review of the United States of America. And so that's the first phase, is all about preparation. And the Universal Periodic Review, I like to call it the Uniting People for Rights, or really the upper, the most comprehensive, holistic review of countries that exist at the UN, that allows for civil society, we the peoples, to participate and also partner with countries around the world to hold our governments accountable. And so the UPR at its core is a review of every country for 3.5 hours every 4.5 years. So this process was created when the United Nations Commission on Human Rights transitioned from a Commission on Human Rights to a UN Human Rights Council. That body used to be what Eleanor Roosevelt chaired. Eleanor Roosevelt chaired the Commission on Human Rights after her important role she played in San Francisco at the creation of the UN. And the Commission on Human Rights is the one that drafted the language for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, and those 30 articles. Does anybody have a favorite article of the UDHR? Just to bring everybody in.
Right to mobilization.
Okay, that's an important one, right? The one that we, the people, can participate, can uh, take part in our government. And what's exciting about the UPR is it's a chance for the world to also have a say. And when they met in San Francisco in 45 from 26 April to 26 June, the idea at that time was never again, right? It was all countries will stumble and all countries will fall, but we'll have a global standard that we won't let any one country fall below, because if that country falls below that standard, we know we're in a spirit of solidarity and all of us will eventually be impacted if that country falls below those standards or treats its people less than that. So it talked about Article 2.7, Article 54, Article 55, but it was that all of us had a duty to make sure that we speak out for one another.
I'm on a call. What?
And we stand up. It's okay, Karen. And thanks for being on the call today. And what we're doing and what we're coordinating is looking at how you can continue that role of what they talked about as the spirit of San Francisco, that we all have that obligation. When that Commission on Human Rights created the UDHR and had 30 articles, and still very open for anyone else to have other articles that they cared about, everyone being born in equal and dignity, and Article 25 and 26, very important as well. Right to education. Article 24 is the right to rest and leisure, also a very important one too, as we're coming out of that period in most of our lives, as we're getting more active. In January 6th is when most people come back into the working world. But for most human rights activists, we're on every day, all the time. And so when that was drafted and the UDHR existed, those 30 articles were a solemn promise to each other that we would work together, building on the language of human rights and self-determination being mentioned 7 times in the UN Charter from San Francisco. And this is what's so important about the UPR. It will review, and we can bring up anything from the UN Charter, anything in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, anything in all of the 10 treaties, the core 10 treaties of human rights, anything that a UN special procedure of this new Human Rights Council that replaced the Commission on Human Rights in 2006, anything one of those special procedures has said about the United States of America or has drafted in one of its thematic studies. There's 44 different varieties of special procedures at the Human Rights Council. Those consist of independent experts, special rapporteurs, and also working groups of various themes. And whenever any of those bodies have written or said anything about the US, that can be utilized, or if they've written a thematic study that you think is relevant or important in your work, you can bring that up. And that'll be important probably for 2 special procedures, 2 rapporteurs right now, one on climate change and human rights, and one also on clean, healthy, safe, and sustainable environment, just to name 2 of those. Also, anything a UN agency has ever said about the United States of America. So around the rest of the world, UNDP, United Nations Development Program, is really the core agency where most of the other dozens of UN agencies, programs, and funds work out of. But anything that one of those important bodies have said about the country can also be raised. And then the last area is international humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions. So you see that it's so vast. That's what really allows us to bring everyone into the movement, to be able to speak and share about what matters most to us, but making sure that that is a main part of the conversation when the 3.5-hour review of the United States takes place, which we know now will be on November 10th of 2025. So that's an overview of all that can be included in this Universal Periodic Review. The Universal Periodic Review can include anything in the UN Charter, And as I said, human rights and self-determination is mentioned is mentioned 7 times. Anything in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So as was brought up about participation, Article 25 has so many important elements in it. If you'd like to share about that briefly, I'd definitely pause there so you could share about Article 25 with our colleagues on why it's so important. If you wanted to. I saw it in the chat, so I just thought it was important to make that space there. Okay, if don't want to raise about 25, there's a lot in there. If people have not read that. It's a really good article.
Joshua, I'm sorry, I couldn't find my button to get off of mute quickly enough, but
There you go, Allison. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, there are a handful of us on this in this training that are involved with the National Right to Food Community of Practice. And so we're an organization committed to learning from each other about ways in which we can progressively realize the right to food in the United States when we haven't, of course, ratified the International Covenant on Economic, Cultural, and Social Rights. So I think the Article 25 is sort of closest to us because of the mention of adequate health and well-being, the right to security. I think there's also that we're also very interested in articles that are directly related to the environment and to the rights of Mother Nature, because the right to food is intertwined with our ability to drink fresh water, breathe clean air, take care of the soils. That there's so much interrelated. So that's why I think it's, for me anyway, it's super exciting to be working with Christina and to begin to understand more deeply how we can bring these two struggles together.
Perfect. And the way you described it, it's really why the UPR is so valuable, because everything is interconnected. And that's what we understand, especially in the rights of Mother Nature, rights of nature movement, but how everything is interconnected. And I saw Brenda wrote earlier as well about being an anthropologist, chef, and gardener. It's looking at all this together, right? If we don't have clean water, if we don't have clean and healthy food, it definitely will impact our health. And it sees how everything is connected, and also how we should take care of each other as well. And this talked about livelihood and being with one another. So I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. And we have definitely organized that in the past throughout the 3 previous cycles of the Universal Periodic Review. And that's the point, right? When the US doesn't recognize these economic, social, and cultural rights, we've got to find the space where we can actually show and illustrate how all the rights are interconnected and interdependent, and then bring it forward in the spaces that it's a legitimate space, that it can be addressed. And many other nations of the world will be able to take this knowledge, share it, but also put pressure on the United States, either as an ally saying, we've done this and look how this has improved the way we care for our constituents and our citizens, or countries who might want to poke the United States a bit and say, look what we do, and you always want to attack us, but look how we do it, and we think it's a successful model, and you might want to learn from us, someone who you constantly criticize. And so it's both ways. And as we reach out to countries in that second phase, we know the first phase is preparation, the second phase is interaction. In that interaction phase, that's where we will take what you have drafted and what you care about most dearly to the UN, to various spaces, and meet with governments and share with them what they should be raising to the United States in that third phase, which is actually the consideration. The third phase is the consideration. That's the 3.5 actual hour review of the United States. It'll take place on November 10th. The exciting part is we can say, look at what we did on January 6th, and then see where we are just by November 10th, and see how much we've been able to shape the conversation so that it reflects what matters most to us, and see the language that was shared at that time. That will be a moment of reflection to either pat ourselves on the back to show what we were able to accomplish, or being utilized that as a tool to hopefully hold a president to task for the remaining 3 years that we'll be facing. And it's very hard for me to say all those things, and how much work we have ahead of us for the 4 years and the foreseeable future. But this UPR is one of those tools that allows us to work in a positive space, that is one where we shape. In fact, I think UPR is this. It's a tool that many of us are good at in the human rights movement of naming and shaming. It will allow us to raise up what is wrong, but it also is what we want. It goes beyond what's wrong to what we want, where it's naming and framing our rights. It's framing and claiming our rights. It goes from naming and shaming to framing and claiming. And we'll be able to frame what is dear to us and then claim those rights, utilizing recognized international law, which is the most important law, and treaty is the highest even in our land. So it's an opportunity for us to be able to organize and to coordinate and move forward. So Chelsea, I'm glad you like that. I think I came up with that probably between the second and third cycle, but definitely third cycle, it was where I was at. It was beyond naming and shaming to framing and claiming the rights that matter most to us, and seeing what we can do together and create this culture of human rights in a world that needs it more than ever. And then just to round out the 5 phases, but don't worry, we're going to go through each one of them in great detail. And after each one, open it up to question and answer so we can go through that and add that information. The fourth one will be the adoption. The adoption will be at the next Human Rights Council session after November, so probably in March of 2026. That phase will allow us to put pressure on the US government to accept specific recommendations. What'll be exciting is, just to give you a vision of what will happen, is there'll probably be around 400 recommendations to this US government, maybe even more, depending on how bad that first year is, that will say what the world is concerned about and what they think should be top care priority areas for the US in that time period. We will know November 10th how successful we were, and how many times your issues were raised and by which nations. So that'll be super exciting in that space. The other and the final aspect is implementation. So you have preparation, interaction, consideration, adoption, implementation. And as you can see, preparation, implementation all begin where we are. And it's what Eleanor Roosevelt talked about bringing human rights home, where it matters most. And that's where we live. And so that's why it's an honor to work on advancing the right to food and looking at to the rights of nature, because that is really at its core what matters most in all the work that all of us care about, and what we really make as a priority in our political work, and how we're involved and informed and try to make a difference in our democracy and around the world. Because that's the exciting part. The UPR allows us to see what language is being raised the most, allowing us to see what our neighbors are doing, how well they're able to really look at promotion, protection, and fulfilling all of these rights, and how those rights are being realized, and inspiring us. if we look in other communities, it actually, in a way, indicates some potential areas that we could go moving forward and ways that we can do things even better. So it's very exciting to use and utilize the UPR to even go beyond what maybe you've thought of so far in the work that we do. But the preparation phase, and in all the 3 phases as we organize, you can look at them and coordinate really at 3 points. At our community level, and that looks at really local and state. So it's our city halls, it's our state legislatures, it's on the campuses in our neighborhoods. And the exciting part is I invite all of you to be part of the U.S. Human Rights Network, of all the countries, of all the communities coming together across the U.S. to demand our basic rights and say this is what matters most to us. And what will happen in this phase is you can definitely see yourselves as one of the working groups in a way. Many groups organize around a specific theme, and we usually coordinate that with, if there's one person or 2 people who are willing to take on a working group, they can pick a theme, and then they host regular meetings to discuss what language they want to use and how they want to contribute to their main document. The most important thing that comes out of this preparation phase, and when you're organizing at the 3 points of community, is really sharing what rights you care about the most, what's the issues, more importantly, also, what's the question you want posed to the US government? And that question you can look at as sort of a SMART question: specific, measurable, action-oriented, results, and with a timetable. You want to make a question that is so sound that the US government will not be able to squirm out of it or be able to just come off without having to fully explain what you're trying to get them to admit to, or more importantly, say how they have not done or what they will try to do going forward. And then the final one is the recommendation. You want to write something so strong because you know this right more than anyone else. You live it. You know that if it is not fully realized, if it's not able to be fully fulfilled by each and every person, then this country is lacking in very huge specific swaths and ways that will structurally impact people's lives. So it's the issue. With each issue you say, you can link it, and this is when it gets really good, to any article in the UN Charter, the UDHR, the 10 treaty bodies that we'll discuss in a little bit, anything that a special procedure has said, anything that a UN agency has said, or anything in international humanitarian law. So that allows you to really put it in international human rights law and say what's important, and think of the strongest question you can pose, and even better, that recommendation. And so recommendations usually come in a couple of ways, right? It could be one, striking a specific practice that's horrible or harmful, or 2, supporting what's possible and doing what we're doing. That was a pretty good language there that we can look at there, of striking or supporting, right? It's knocking down something that's bad, or supporting and scaling something up that is in its infancy and doing good. And so by doing those 2 things, those are what you'll look at for your recommendations of what we're coordinating. And at that community level, this is your chance to talk to everybody about human rights. This is your chance to say, do you know what your rights are? This is the chance to explain, do you know what the UN is? For most people, no one knows what the UN is. They think it's this one body, but the truth is, I consider the UN sort of like a lot of different beaches, since I'm from Hawaii, or different islands, since we have 8 of them, at least as a beginning here, for you to know the geography of this beautiful place I'm able to call home. And you can go to each one depending on what you're in the mood for. If I want to go see lava flow, I go to Hawaii Island, right? So if I'm trying to work on certain issues, I'll look at the UDHR. If I'm trying to look at other issues, I'll look at humanitarian law, unfortunately, because we have too much military. And we also have too many projects that harm people around our neighbors and around the planet. So you can utilize and bring out what you care about the most in this process. And then what's exciting though is this is then a chance for you to talk to everybody about our rights, which only 10% of the people in the United States know the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we have a lot of work to still do. We can make up that 90% as we talk about it. More people know about what happened at the Golden Globes or the playoffs this weekend than the UDHR. So this is our chance to sort of popularize human rights education and let more people know about it. But then it's also our chance to explain what is the UN and how we can utilize them. One of the rewarding aspects of these trainings, and the reason that I definitely am involved with it, is after this process, most of you will be like, what is next? Which rapporteur is visiting the United States? What can we do? Which treaty body review will happen? Is it the Committee Against Torture? Is it the Human Rights Committee focusing on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights? Is it the important work under CERD, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination? How can I be involved and how can I utilize this UN to put pressure on our country? I kind of consider it, since it's your lunch and I guess my breakfast time coming up soon, this is a great time for a panini sandwich or a breakfast sandwich, I guess, a brekkie sandwich here, where we get to coordinate from the community area, which we're talking about, and bringing up what matters most to you and utilizing the UN structure and sort of making a state sandwich for all the plant-based people, and squeeze in the truth out. Squeezing out that truth, just like the cheese, so everyone knows what matters most and what we care about. This is our chance to bring it from the grassroots and utilize the global, whatever it is that exists, in this case, the UPR, and squeeze out the truth and put pressure from both sides on our state. In this case, the United States of America, which many people feel is almost untouchable and difficult to put pressure on. But I can prove through the UPR in the last 3 cycles how much people have been able to come together and really grow their movement, which what matters most to them, in your case, right to food and rights of nature, but also connect with other movements to realize how we're all in this together and really see what's possible when we organize with a human rights-based approach and coordinating that way. Healthy food is definitely organized in some cities and states, and that's why I'm bringing up the community approach. I have a new role this UPR cycle, which I never thought I'd be in, but I'm the mayor of Maui. It's the first Kanaka Maoli Hawaiian mayor. Was a retired judge who never ran for office, and he reached out and he asked if I would be interested in helping out the new office he was creating on innovation and sustainability. So it's great to be the chief sustainability officer for Maui. Maui covers 3 islands. Maui, that most people know about, where unfortunately many people know about from the wildfire that took place August 8th, which is definitely an issue on rights of nature, as we're going to have to look at decolonizing, as was brought up with the land acknowledgement, decarbonizing, decorporatizing, and decentralizing everything as we rebuild and recover Lahaina, but also Molokai, which is very much a food agricultural area that we can talk about, and I can connect you with farmers on Molokai. And that's the exciting part, right? Is who would think that we can have East Coast of US working with farmers on Molokai, but it's all the same language and all the same national movement that we're looking at of a really liberation of the land. And so that's exciting. And also the island of Lanai as well. So now I actually started meeting before the end of the year with our prosecuting attorneys division, working with our Department of Witnesses and Survivors, and working with our emergency management and working with our water department, as water is a human right, to then work at the city hall level to write reports, not asking permission, but writing reports of what matters most to sort of build on what Metric CSP was saying, right? Healthy food being legislated, that's what we're aiming towards and coordinating, is that you are in this phase, in that recommendation, writing the language that is most important, that would advance your cause. And the exciting part is we get to look at 195 other countries, officially 193, but the Holy See and also Palestine participate in the UPR. Either one of those entities can ask a question of the United States on November 10th. So that's the kind of exciting part. As we look at this phase of preparation, it's our chance to reach out across our communities, our campuses, our city halls, and say what matters most. We are kicking off our legislative session January 15th, and I'll be working in multiple roles. We have a Climate Futures Forum, which is all youth, and they'll be having a sustainability study hall on the opening day of the legislature, where they'll be writing their testimony for the whole year. And they'll be looking at human rights issues that they think are important. And they're also looking at the rights of nature. So maybe one of you can be a guest speaker on January 15th and talk to youth about why you're involved in this important work and inspire them. And that's really what it's all about, is each one teach one, and sharing, as we call in Hawaii, our mana'o, our views, our beliefs, what we hold dear to us with one another, and strengthening the movement together. And so that's the community side. The end result, we can think of two things. Let's always think of it in two ways. What's the most creative thing we can coordinate together? And what's the most centralized, important part that we can do that's rooted in law, right? On the creative side, not everyone wakes up and goes, I want to write a 5 or 10 page document. The biggest thing that we're going to be able to do is write a 5-page document that covers those issues I shared with you. Issue, question, recommendation. You can write a lot more about it, but the exciting thing is each individual can write 5 pages. Now, what's also important is any collective group of people coming together, such as yourselves, can write a 10-page document and submit that to the UN, in this case, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So our end result on April 7th, when the report is due, is you will have a 5-page document maybe that some of you write, and at least a 10-page document that puts everything together and shows what matters most. So that's significant, that's crucial, that's going to be pretty informative, and that's what's most exciting. You get to frame and claim your right, and as was described here earlier, in a way you can legislate, create the language of legislation that you want, that you think should be posed to the United States and that the US government should accept. So this is that opportunity to do that, and let's let Karen in and keep adding to our merry group in the movement. And so that is the most significant and substantive thing that we can do. And that is writing that. But the other side is, what super creative thing could we create? And let me just give you a couple examples of what we've done. We've had contests, video contests, where anyone could make a video that illuminates this important issue that you care about. And so we had a video contest that we partnered with Witness, Peter Gabriel's NGO. And everybody remembers him from, I guess, Shock the Monkey and a whole bunch of other great songs, Sledgehammer. And I thought I'd just bring that up because I see people smiling, because many people know the music and have been able to dance to that. As we're looking at a new year, it's a great time for you to think about what matters most, what gets you grooving and going for the good. And Peter Gabriel definitely did that, but also realized the power of video when he created Witness. So we partnered with them and we had a video contest. The cool thing is then we utilize those videos throughout the entire UPR. And I think that's definitely something that we could coordinate this time as well, is what should we do to bring it out? I think the video contest is great. And what we did is, in this case, the Immokalee farm workers were picking a lot of the vegetables that go on most of the food that many of us eat, kind of connected it and raised the issue of slavery. And so they utilized the UDHR, ICCPR, a handful of the instruments. So this is also your chance, right? You're like, I've never heard of the ICCPR, the ICESCR, the CERD. This is your chance to learn about all those rights, teach about all those rights, and get the word out so everybody knows what all their rights are. And we've only ratified 3 of the 10. So I'll take a brief moment, since this is a good space here, as we're getting to the national level, because it's community, country, capital, and then global civil society. We can work at all 3 of those levels in each one of these phases. And if you break it down, then it makes it simple. It's not like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? For each 5 phases, there's 3 spaces you can be coordinating in. At the community in Washington, D.C., at the capital area, national level, and at the global civil society level. So at the community level, we've been describing it a lot. It allows you to come together. Brenda, I will find those. I think they're actually on a DVD and also on, I don't know if they're up on any website yet, but I was going to bring those up. So I will find those, but they're great videos, great teaching tools. And then what we did for the interaction phase all the way up to the consideration phase is we showed those videos everywhere and had events. So in Geneva, on the night before the first UPR of the United States, way back in the day of 2010, we actually had a video party at a nightclub, and everyone came, all the diplomats in Geneva, all the civil society, directly impacted peoples, and we were watching those videos in the background and still utilizing it as a phenomenal teaching tool to do that. And so that's a really good one. I'll look at that teaching tool and transformative tactic. We'll look at it in both ways, but we can definitely share and describe those really good aspects there. And then we also showed them in DC when we would have consultations with the government. That second phase of the national level is we organize in DC. We organize also with broader groups, Amnesty International, United Nations Association, to name a few, US Human Rights Network. And we come together around themes that matter most to us and talk to each other and make new connections that never existed before. That's the exciting part. It allows you to create connections, but also to sort of coordinate campaigns that never existed before. Because we're sort of, even as NGOs, we're sort of in silos. We don't talk to each other enough. We talk to the people we work with, who we're comfortable with, but this is a chance for you to reach out and talk to everyone. And at the country level in this phase, it's us getting to know each other. It's like having events like this where we talk to each other and moving from there going forward. That's at the capital level. It's events that we'll do, and we'll have more events like this. And then at the global civil society, it's reaching out. It's talking to your partners who do the right to food. And there's many countries where it's in their constitution. In fact, I just got back from the International Court of Justice, working on the advisory opinion case focusing on climate change and the rights of future generations. I was just in The Hague in early December, 1 month ago, actually, from today. And there they had, of course, a case brought by Vanuatu and Pacific Island countries led by youth. It was Pacific Island students at the University of South Pacific that brought this issue forward. and they said, this is what matters most. This issue of climate change is huge. It's life and death. It's an existential climate emergency. And the world's highest court should be looking at the biggest issue. So they brought that there. And that was happening inside the Peace Palace. But there was also a People's Assembly where different people from around the planet shared, as directly impacted people, testimonials of what they're facing to the climate crisis and how it is life and death, not in the future, but today. And so from that experience there, that's where I know that I can learn from the people of Tuvalu. I can learn from the people of Kiribati. I can connect with them. And that's what you'll be able to do in your movement is we'll reach out to the other groups. There's a CFL that's pretty exciting in our country that works on the East Coast on rights of nature. But there's many groups. Bolivia's got amazing language on that. So this is your chance to reach out and talk to all the countries and to connect and coordinate. And in the second phase, I'll describe with you a couple tools that we can look at. But the main thing we're going to look at today is preparation, interaction, and consideration with a little bit of adoption and a little bit of implementation so you know the whole cycle. But while we're spending the first hour looking at preparation, it's because it allows us to look at the entire process of what matters most. And so as we're looking at national and international, right, at the Capitol, Washington, D.C., and the global civil society, this is a time to look at all the treaties that exist. And unfortunately, we've only ratified 3 of them. And so one of the recommendations you'll see will be ratifying the ones we haven't. That's a good one, but also sort of a difficult one because the truth is the Senate needs 2/3 and you know that's not going to come about easily since they can't even agree on a lot of things. So we can't just wait for those ratifications. It's time for us to be creative, right? The UPR is our chance, as I said, to strike down something negative or scale up something that we care about the most and show why it's significant. And so this is our chance to do that. And the treaties are good. The treaties might give you the language. The treaties, and as I get into them, have a couple of parts to them. Number one is what is that covenant convention? But what also is the general comments, which are sort of amendments to these treaties that have been drafted in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. It is an amendment that says, what have we learned or where are we at with human rights? So these general comments, these recommendations that are drafted are great. CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, they have a committee, of course, and that committee just drafted a general comment on Indigenous women's rights. So that then shows the latest of where we're at on Indigenous women's rights. So these treaty bodies are essential. They're groups of 10 to 23 experts that are reviewing countries at least 2 to 3 times a year, drafting general comments showing the evolution of human rights, and also through optional protocols, actually creating jurisprudence by actually being in a way a Supreme Court of whatever theme we're talking about. And for countries that have ratified optional protocols, meaning they agree to be held and have their individual citizens bring cases forward, actually trying cases and coming up with rulings of if a person or people believe their rights have been violated under one of these covenants or conventions. So these are pretty exciting. The UDHR is seen as the most important. It's a declaration. People consider it customary international law because it has been around for nearly 80 years. And that's why we argue a lot for those economic, social, and cultural rights, such as Article 25 that you raised with me today. But then the others are the ICCPR and the ICESCR. Those are also known as the Twin Covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. Those embody the 4 freedoms from Franklin Roosevelt that Eleanor was working on as well. And that's where they broke down the UDHR. Comment Article 1, though, is very important. That's self-determination, right? To determine one's political destiny, pursue economic, social, and cultural development according to your own cultural model. So that, I think, also embodies. So you might want to use Article 1 of ICCPR in your work because the US hasn't ratified the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And so that's something that we can work on, but also to have the government admit that those are rights and not just that they're recognized under international law, but also in our country. That's what we definitely have to work at with the current crazy cabinet being assembled. So it will be absolutely important in our work to be able to raise what we care about in that space. After that, it's CERD. CERD is, sounds like a breath mint, but CERD is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. The US has ratified that. So that's the other one we've ratified, and I've participated in many of those reviews. Those are very important and exciting and great place. We've brought Trayvon Martin's family. We've brought many people who have been directly impacted by racial discrimination to speak on behalf of their loved ones they've lost or speak directly for themselves about what they experience. Breonna Taylor, many as well. So that's CERD. Then there's CAT, which is a small little animals. I haven't seen any of those tails yet in our training so far. That's also the Convention Against Torture, though. That's an important one. That's the other one we have ratified. The Convention Against Torture also has a subcommittee and a important instrument where any prison could be visited at any time. Pretty exciting one, because then that holds prisons sort of accountable, that they know someone could absolutely just show up at any moment. It'd be like if we're doing a 3rd or 4th UPR training and I could just show up at one of your homes at any time. I'm sure, like most people, you'd be like, oh, these are all my books. Come visit my garden. I work on this stuff all the time. Same way students would if you're, doing things. Oh my goodness, great, you can show up anytime. We have nothing to hide. This is all the work I do. I live this, I dream this. Come visit Josh and let's go plant while we're doing this training. No problem. We have nothing to hide, but many prisons, of course, would not want that. So the Committee Against Torture and the special subcommittee are pretty exciting elements. We can, of course, know the US has never ratified that important protocol, bringing up that there could be surprise visits. The other one that exists is CEDAW, rhymes with hee-haw. CEDAW is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. There's 23 experts on CEDAW. How many do you think are women? What do we think as a group? Where are we at? Just since it's 1 hour, it's a good time to check in with everybody. All right, Justine's been hurt. She thinks there's only 2 women. All right, Justine, that's fair in the world we live in. Anybody else say a little bit higher? Or it could have been the peace sign. I'm not sure, but I think she was saying 2. Anyone want to go a little higher than Justine? We could do a little Vegas here, a lot of people go there for the holidays. Try to imagine things. Vegas is a fun place because everybody's drinking and everybody's a friend they just haven't met yet. It's kind of how I see the world. So we got 2 so far. Anybody higher? All right, Allison's going up to 5. Way to go, Allison. Brave. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All right, shy group. I thought I could try to come up. It's just numbers. Anyone could throw it out, right? There's nothing wrong. I won't remember it after today. I won't be like, oh, Justine with 2 and Allison on 5. Come on. Definitely. I'll be like a field goal kicker and just forget everything instantly. Excitingly enough, I just worked at CEDAW. All right, brave iPhone, all the way up to 7, bumping it up by 2. Very bold. I was just working CEDAW in November. I was there assisting the indigenous peoples and the democracy movement of Laos. And I'm proud to say there's 22 of 23 experts are women on that committee. And only 1 man from Azerbaijan. All right. Wow. Oh my God. Is that party symbols? Look at you go, Justine. That's right. I was like New Year's Eve all over again, just so recently. That's great. And so less than a week ago, right? And so 22 of 23 are women. So it's exciting. We should ratify that. But we haven't ratified yet. We're one of a half dozen that have not ratified. So cities are ratifying. You can coordinate a Cities for CEDAW movement. You can, the state of Hawaii has adopted CEDAW. So these are things that you can do at the community first C level. Don't have to wait for the US. And good, Justine. Nap time is good. I take a nap time too. We could institute, it's Article 24 time for the baby. Since we're doing UPR training, it's right to rest and leisure. Article 24 for the little one there, knocking out. There we go, looking good. Hey, aloha. And so that's CEDAW, a very important one, just to give you a little bit of a glimpse of these instruments and why they're important. And they also have optional protocols where individual women bring cases. Canada has some great language that women have raised there and done. But yeah, we're one of the few countries that have not ratified CEDAW. Then after that, there's we talked about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the CRC. Australians call it the CROC. But the Convention on the Rights of the Child has 54 articles, most comprehensive: civil, political, economic, social, cultural, collective, environment, humanitarian law, child soldiers, all those aspects. Has multiple optional protocols on pornography, sex trafficking, prostitution, child soldiers, and then individual youth being allowed to bring cases forward. That's always one of the optional protocols. Then there's Convention on Migrant Workers and Their Families. Needless to say, not something we've ratified, unfortunately, as there's all these loopholes, even for youth under 16 years of age, of course, to work on farms that you would know about as well. Horrible things that are done. And then Convention on Enforced Disappearances as well. So that allows us to look at all those 10 human rights treaty bodies: Convention on Migrant Workers and Their Families, Convention on Forced Disappearances, all those things that we haven't ratified. All we've ratified is ICCPR, civil and political, CAT on torture, and racial discrimination. What was great, since we are looking at 20 years of UPR, is during those first ones, we actually had people would say, how do you define torture? I don't know what that is. The great part is we could say, simple, look at the treaty you've ratified. That's one of the important ones that we can look at and share there. So it was really easy to bring those up, to talk about those. And the last one is the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD. So those are the 10. And anything that the US has ratified, those 3, we can bring up in that space. So the most important part, and what we'll stop here with preparation, is this is our chance to work in our communities at the Capitol in DC, or virtually like we're doing today across the country, and with global civil society, to frame and claim our rights. The next phase we'll get into for the second part is interaction. But before we get into that, is there anything that any questions people have?
Feel free to open your mic or just type your questions on the chat. There were some questions in terms of this preparation phase that I know came at one of the working groups. And it was, how many reports could we submit, could the one working group submit with all these treaties and declarations and conventions? And then also Chelsea has her hand up, but maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, so like I said, each individual can write a 5-pager. So this is a time to be strategic, right? If you're so inclined and you want to write, this is your chance to write it as you see it. Maybe it's telling your testimony, maybe it's being The cool part is everything submitted will be on the UN website and it stays there. But as a working group focused on the right to food and right to nature, maybe you make 2 working groups, one for food, one for nature. So you can do 2 documents that allow you to then cite all of the declarations, all of the UN agency work of what UNICEF has done or those, and put that in, or the language of a special rapporteur, a special procedure. So you could do 2. You can be strategic, right? If you're making 2, it's so you can maybe say things, but then reinforce each other so that there's going to be a actual individual that will take all of these documents and turn it into a 10-page report. They'll take every report written and come up with a 10-page document that will be one of the 3 official documents that's reviewed at the UPR. The other 2 that are reviewed, each one is 10. Civil society's report is 10 pages. So they'll take everything that anyone's written from the United States or from around the world about the United States and make a 10-page document, heavily footnoted. So you'll see
Joshua,
there. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but who makes that decision about who's the coordinating body for that 10-page?
It's the OHCHR. It's actually an individual or a group, but it's all the employees of the OHCHR based in Geneva. So on a fun note, it's okay. You can interrupt anytime at all. That's what we sort of hope this is a good creative flow where we all get everything we need to know. And so last time it was actually a person named Luca. So I made up songs about Luca lives on the 2nd floor. And Luca was the one that was responsible to do that whole thing. So the Office of OHCHR, Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, is the body. It's the UN agency that focuses on human rights. It was created after the World Conference on Human Rights that took place in Vienna in 1993. So it's experts, it's young people, it's seasoned professionals, but they take all of it. So they have a very difficult task. That's why we do our best to write reports that are super clear so that when they're writing the report, it comes out really good. The other 10-page document that's looked at and considered, which we'll talk about in the interaction phase, is the UN. The UN, who, very similar to the ones who did this report of bringing in all the civil society documents, look at everything that was ever written about the United States. Anything that the UN Human Rights Council has said with all of its special procedures, its country visits, anything a UN agency has said, anything a treaty body has said that has not yet been enacted, anything that matters dearly to one of those treaty bodies that was given as a recommendation that was not implemented, they can cite that and bring that up again. And then anything under humanitarian law. So that's the second one. The third one is the United States government. The United States government writes a 20-page document. So you sort of have a 20 versus 20. US writes a 20-page document, and then that they sort of go head to head because the governments always write how great they are, right? They don't have any New Year's resolutions. They'll talk about how much money they put in, how great their programs are, all the good things they do. And then the civil society and the UN one sort of gives a more accurate picture and raises what they believe are the most important issues that have to be addressed, if that's helpful. And then the other important one that we can look at or discuss is those 3 documents, right? So those 3 documents, we can look at those. But with the UPR, our documents due April 7th. So the first document that'll be ready is the ones from civil society and from the UN. The US report won't be due until the summer. It's basically 6 months before the actual UPR. So we can then push and coordinate. And then as you talk about Canada, I know Trudeau is saying he's going to go today, but I can pull up Canada's UPR cycle and let you know when that is, but it'll follow the same format. looking at the questions in there. And so we can look at that. And as Ian ratification,
I want to be able to stack the questions. Chelsea had her hand up a while ago, and then maybe we can go to Metric and to Ian, if that's okay.
Thanks so much, Christina.
But before we go to Chelsea, to understand, only one 10-page report per working group. Is that correct?
yes.
Okay, thanks. Chelsea?
Yeah, it's a follow-on question that relates to that, Christina. Joshua, I just wonder whether you could give us some strategic advice. So obviously we can divide into as many working groups as we want. We can be as many organizations as we want. We could submit as many reports as we want. You know, we could submit copies of each other's reports. We have 111 members at the community of practice. We could submit 111 individual responses. What is most compelling to the team that is compiling the civil society report? Is it I think clarity and consistency and, weaving the sort of points between different reports is obviously going to be helpful because they are getting so much information that they need to sift through. But are they, in your experience, is it more compelling to have a report with many logos and many signatories and, sort of as many organizations as possible on the single one? Or hearing this kind of cacophony of many reports saying the same sorts of things and bringing that to the attention from lots of different perspectives? I think there will be, so that's one bit of it, and then we need as a group to think about how we focus the thematic approach, because there will be aspects of the right to food that link very soundly and clearly with environmental justice, colleagues and members and those kinds of things. But that's a follow-on question. So this first question is about numbers, strategy, and how we use a membership type organization to the most effective, in the most effective way.
Yeah, great question. One thing I think we could do, it's a combination really. And so I love the question, Chelsea. It's the good part where we get to know each other and get strategic, because it's a combination, right? I would say I always write my own individual one for my nonprofit Hawaii Institute for Human Rights. Then I also contribute definitely to one or two working groups that relate to what I'm working on when there's a direct link. I really concentrate that I can link it to one of the articles of the treaty we ratified or the UDHR. Then the other side, though, that's absolutely crucial, is then I do make sure, though, there's certain areas where law should go that's not where it's at, but we're not going to just magically get there. So I will connect with another working group and at least draw the line so it could see where we're headed, knowing that if we get a mention, great, because it advances it a bit, but I'm definitely stretching it. So I did that with the Convention on Torture. I said removing indigenous peoples from their land is tantamount to torture. So there was a lot of real examples of environmental human rights defenders being tortured, and I definitely talked about their specific cases, but I also brought up the larger issue that maybe wasn't directly seen or understood in international law because they don't understand the relation between indigenous and connection to land. And now the cat has got to that point. So, I say it's a combination, and you don't want to flood them where they're like, damn, right? So it's that kind of nuanced area where they're seeing it enough, but it's clearly not just a damn campaign that we're wasting their time. And I think that's where we hold each other sort of accountable. And this is where you also know where sometimes, so let's say the US Human Rights Network was the group that I've worked with on top of a couple of the other ones that what we've done. And, I would do 3 reports or contribute to 3. I'd do my Hawaii Institute for Human Rights one. That was just what's important to Hawaii. Then I would contribute to a working group, 1 or 2 of them, indigenous rights, and help contribute to that 10-pager before April 7th. But then we'd have a big meeting as a country, all the civil society together, everyone being honest, and go, all right, what's the top 10? And let's do 1 page per and have 10 issues, or do 20 and have half a page per each one. And guess what? Hawaii independence is probably, I think it's significant, but maybe Guantanamo Bay and everything else that's going on, death penalty is a higher priority. And I understand that maybe if we bring up indigenous rights, then we can talk about Hawaii with self-determination briefly in there. But we really are honest and look at each other in the mirror and say, what do we think is where we're at? And at 3 months into this crazy thing that starts January 20th, I think we'll have a lot to say. And so good news, Allison, I know there's a stack, but since I was talking about U.S. Human Rights Network, it is coming back. We're utilizing the UPR as a way to grow its movement and bring it back from its status. And seeing the UPR in a way is sort of a great training ground to see everybody who wants to get involved, everybody who participates. It'll be a great way to say, hey, is this for you? Do you want to be involved? How can you share and discuss as well? And so that is one thing that will be coming back. And but there's lots of other national groups. So one, it's a chance for us as a country to get to know all the other civil society groups that do the work that we may not know about. So it's a really good opportunity. I think that's great. And it allows us then to coordinate going forward. So yeah, Canada, its 4th cycle will be in 2028. So we got a little bit of time. We can coordinate that. You'll probably do another voluntary national review under the SDGs before then. And I would suggest it's a great practice for a UPR under the voluntary national reviews under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 goals. Great practice. And I think
I wanted to lift metrics question, and I'm not sure that I fully understood. Would food justice legislation be legislated?
This is metric here. And
Go ahead.
CSP stands for Community Stabilization. And we do a lot of work around housing, food, energy, justice as well. And with the conversation that I came to the conclusion that when I'm hearing people say housing or food or health is a human right, I'm like saying, well, that's really a misrepresentation, because in the United States overall, it's not a human right. And so let's stop saying it is a human right or it should be a human right. And how do we make it a human right? And I go back to FDR. I think he had the right idea with his second Bill of Rights that he was going to do. So for me, it's kind of like there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of paperwork, but at the end of the day, for the United States, there's no basic foundation. Like, why are you doing this? Because we don't have that as a legislator. We can just keep on doing, and like in some places when they say the police can just keep shooting people and murdering people because they have the right to do that under a legislator. So I'm just to the place of how do we actually not just have conversations, but create a foundation, and especially for America as we go out on a national level, that to be a civilized country, we're the most uncivilized social country probably in the world that doesn't protect the rights and ensure equitable accessibility to human rights to anyone. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation, but how do we reach out on a global level when we at home, I see all the women on this call here, and we don't even have an ERA in the United States, and so how do we also work while we're doing this other work that we're doing? How do we start establishing a foundation to work off of, as well?
So I appreciate your point, wholeheartedly understand it, but it definitely around the world, it is a human right, and Roosevelt was getting at that as well. And I think we have a rich conversation about that. And people have utilized the UPR plus other treaties to push economic, social, cultural rights in those reviews. And definitely on the right to housing, a colleague of mine, Eric Tars, has used that also in court cases as well. So I think we're going for the same thing. It's we aren't waking up in a world today in the United States where those are rights and people can have them. But what we're trying to do is, of course, move to the point where it's juridical. But what we, of course, do know is it is a human right. Just because the US doesn't recognize it, majority of the countries in the world have ratified the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And a majority of those 44 special procedures at the UN also are very active on economic, social, cultural rights. And I think I understand exactly what you're saying, because the truth is we live in a world where if our rights aren't recognized, and especially in the country we live in, we have to stand up and demand those rights. And even if the country doesn't want to recognize them, we all know that you can't have civil and political without economic, social, cultural, and they're interconnected. And we also know in the globalized economy that we live in as well, it's even more crucial and important than ever before. So the UPR is just one tool that we can utilize to move closer to what you're sharing of what we all desire, which is not what we find today when we wake up, though. So many people have utilized the courts at the state level and even at the Supreme Court. I was working with the groups from the first UPR on juvenile death penalty. And that was one of the recommendations, to end juvenile death penalty. And then that was a Supreme Court case. But they cited the work that was done through the first UPR, through the ICCPR, through the CERD. It was NGOs from mainly Chicago in this case that did great work that talked about and brought up victims of torture to all those three spaces and demanded specific rights that then were recognized later, and things were changed. So we can utilize this UPR to get to what you shared and what we all want to do and want to achieve, and hope we'll move in that direction. Although, as is pointed out, it's we're headed into a bad government in Canada and a bad one here too as well. So we have to coordinate and mobilize that way. And Ian also said ratifications are one thing. True, we actually have to work at all this at all points. My friend Rob Robinson loves to not only talk about us as human rights defenders, but also human rights enforcers. And maybe that shouldn't be the case, but the truth is, in the end, it is the people who do that, because very few governments hold themselves accountable, and no matter what process it is at whatever level. So we're both finding ourselves moving into difficult places, and we need to coordinate and go forward. And I'd say in Canada, there's some great space to partner with Indigenous people. I've definitely worked with the Choctaw Nation, who had their Supreme Court case ruled for in a more positive favor, and many other Indigenous people. So we're concentrating sort of on the UPR of the US, but we can definitely weave back and forth between both. I'll stop there though. And
I want to make sure that Metric's
I
question
got it going
was
pretty smooth.
can you hear me?
One last,
Joshua,
yeah.
can you
Yeah.
hear me? I want to make sure if Metric's question was answered in would food justice legislation be legislated through the same committee that legislates through the Farm Bill? I'm not sure I quite understand. The Farm Bill at a national level is separate. The Senate and House agriculture committees or draft and work on the Farm Bill, and then with the UPR, this would not go through those committees, but can they, I mean, there's definitely language that can be introduced and bills that can be introduced and marker bills that can be introduced for the farm bills using UPR language. But I guess maybe wanted to make sure that question had been answered. Joshua, I don't know if you have any comments around that.
Well, maybe if he wants to comment, if that was clear about what he was saying, the way you represented it, then we can go from there.
Please.
What, I'm sorry, what was, is that okay, Metric? I couldn't hear.
Well, I guess my point and with that question is a lot of people in the United States are being fed through the Farm Bill. And right now, people, especially in urban communities, do not understand that. They don't understand that the legislation of how there's even eating unhealthy food or any type of food. And so just like in the naming of it being the Farm Bill, it's a misrepresentation of who it serves. So again, no, like how do you start at a base level of making sure that when we want this conversation is about the people globally, but it's also about the people that is in America, in the United States. And how do they get on board with this conversation? And so like reach people where they are as well and get them connected to what is most relevant to them. So the Farm Bill is one of those things that I think is a total misrepresentation. Here in Minnesota, that's one of the issues that I'm going to work on is that how can we amend, at least in the state of Minnesota, how can we amend the Farm Bill to have a more inclusive and actionable representation, so people can know it's about them, and if you live in a rural area or urban area. So I guess that's what I'm trying to get with that question. What are the different pathways to the conversation that we're having here? No, it's not just one pathway, but many different pathways, and I think that Farm Bill is one of those pathways.
Thank you. That was good.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. So great question. And I think that's what we're getting at. And that's also what the whole part that we've covered today is it's how to utilize the UPR to be able to be relevant where you live. And you said Minnesota, and then also educate more people so they know about their rights and how they can utilize it going forward. And then it's utilizing in a way the national legislation that does exist to be advancing what you care about that probably is wonky that none of people know about. So I love that we're getting into the Farm Bill. I just met someone on the bus the other day working on the Farm Bill here on Maui who came out to do some aspects on it. So getting all those pieces together is a great way for us to see what's possible and how we can coordinate with one another to make sure that people know what they need to know about national legislation, but also to see what might be done at the local level. So it's utilizing both. And there was a question on the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. So I wanted to weave that in as well. So Hawaii as a state became the first state to adopt UNDRIP even before we added Article 46, which weakened it a little bit. So we adopted it in its most pure form before it was adopted with the compromise text on September 13 in 2007. So you can take some of the international language that you say is the strongest, maybe that comes out from a special rapporteur's thematic study or general recommendation from one of the treaty bodies and push that. So this is really our chance to come up with what I'm talking about is the framing and claiming of the rights as strongly as it is. And if there's certain things in the Farm Bill that aren't working, Metric, you're one of the only ones who knows the Farm Bill that well that we know what needs to change. So this is your chance in a way to put it out there. And this is a horrible example because it was so horrible, but it was something we were thinking about anyway. Was Project 25 was the Heritage Foundation's dream list about what they always wanted. And now they have it. And we were thinking of the UPR no matter who won in two ways. One is we're in the belly of the beast and this is horrible and we're going to fight for everything, which is where we find ourselves, or a wish list of what human rights communities and human rights defenders want for the future of the nation, and to put it all out there and not compromise, not be like, oh, we hope maybe we can have a national human rights institution. Oh, we should have an intergovernmental task force that works in between the reviews to implement them. Oh, Parliament, our Congress should have hearings on all these human rights things. We should actually put down exactly what you desire that you know is missing, that if it's not done won't ever work. So this is our chance to put everything in. So that's the reason I'm given 2 hours today. And I definitely see it probably as the first of at least a couple more where we can talk together, because I believe collectively you have some insights on the issue of food, on the issue of rights to nature that people don't have. And collectively we can come up with a stronger statement, more importantly, and the language that will advance both of these rights in a significant way that will have an impact all the way down to our city halls and our communities and our classrooms. I know we're trying to get a bill passed where all our cafeterias serve food grown in Hawaii, and it always gets stalled. So I want to hear if Minnesota's adopted it and how they did it, and then I can push my county council as well as my state of Hawaii legislature to do the same. So this is it. And that's why I said the first phase of preparation is really all about education and empowerment and action. So I'll stop there, and then we'll move quickly into implementation and consideration, adoption, and implementation. So you at least know in the second phase of interaction what we'll be doing from April 7th through November 9th. But I'll also take any final questions as I'm trying to do that and keeping track of the time. And everybody in Hawaii is waking up, so I'm starting to get a whole lot of texts of what everybody wants to do. But definitely appreciate all the talks, and agree that food banks definitely don't cut it. What we're trying to move is a rights-based approach, and what the world kind of has is a charity and, oh, you're so fortunate approach, and we want to definitely change that. Thank you, Allison. It's great to know that's exactly why you created the National Right to Food Community of Practice. And really do cherish, like, those people wouldn't be excited to wake up before 7 o'clock on January 6th, but I definitely was, because I thought we could get into these things, and I love all the mentionings in the chat that we can coordinate. And then I see this as the beginning, but hopefully to work with you throughout the entire process until the implementation phase, or at least the adoption phase in Geneva. And you might be like, we don't need you now, Josh. We got the implementation phase. This is what we do. But definitely here as a partnership to coordinate. All right. So Chelsea.
I think there is another question from Chelsea.
Yep.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to really briefly chime in that April 7th seems quick in some ways for groups that are working to, so we have we've got a small working group that works on global linkages within the community of practice, and we're gearing up to do some work to gather information from our members. We've been involved in UPR submissions in the past, but we've got a sort of quite a lot more people involved this year. And so just to make you aware that it's really exciting to be talking to you about this. Absolutely want to keep the door open to further communication about how we work together between now and April, but then going forward. But our group will be sort of kicking off our data gathering, kind of evidence gathering in the next, I'd say 2 weeks. Next week, we'll be having a meeting where we start harvesting is the wrong word, but gathering information, harvesting or gathering information from members who attend the meeting, our regular monthly meetings, and then we'll be going out and kind of trying to find specific examples of key issues that people want to raise and want to have included in our submissions, but also sort of evidence or case studies that they want that we can include as well. So that's just a little bit of a note about where we're at in our process, but I'm really excited to keep involved in the conversation with you.
Wonderful. I feel the exact same way and totally agree. And it is. Some people were like, oh, there's one group I'm helping, and they're like, oh, we should aim for like January 20th or January 21st. And I'm like, January 6th is the day. It's 3 months till the report's due. Like you said, Chelsea, we are planting the seeds. We are harvesting. There's not enough time. The good news, though, is this. I think we can help anyone get involved with it at any part of the 5 phases. So, but I appreciate your dedication to excellence where, yes, we have 3 months. There's a lot to do between that time, and it's important to work on that and coordinate. And
Okay, next we
but
have
I think
Ian.
this group can do it. And then I got it, Christina. I got this. I can see everything. I see the way it's working.
Thank you.
I got it. Go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Joshua. I don't know if this is slightly off topic. I think where my head is going with some of this is understanding kind of jurisdiction of like local governments and in our case provinces in terms of like ratification and obligations. Like if we're pushing local governments to you know, bring forward more of a rights-based framework to any of their policies, like do these more international frameworks, I mean, how do they, how can we, like what are kind of more local government obligations to these declarations, which are more international in context and maybe more sort of national state jurisdiction? Because that's the level where we're working a lot at the local level ourselves, and we want to bring forward these, like, you know, the covenants on social rights. But is, you know, I guess for me, it's trying to understand how we can.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm getting at here? I haven't quite.
I totally know where you're getting at. I hope I do. I think I do, and that's why I brought all the local examples. And that's why I shared about working for the mayor, right? So I mean, here's the thing. A treaty is ratified, it becomes above the country's law. It is mandated. But a lot of the things that happen have to be implemented at the local level. So Canada, especially, plus United States, when they go, they at least do window dressing. They will bring a mayor, they'll bring a governor, they'll bring an attorney general, and they'll talk about how they're implementing human rights. So let me just give you an example of how we took something that the federal government did, and then we utilize it for us. There's a review happening of at the UN. It was on a treaty, and in that treaty, they brought up the mayor of Atlanta. So what we did is we're like, sweet, we have a Human Rights Cities Alliance that also includes Canada, Ian, so we can actually discuss that another time. But what we did was like, oh, this is great. They brought Atlanta. Everybody told me 2 things. The people of Atlanta talked about all the bad things he did, and I knew every detail about the things he's doing that's wrong. So I could put pressure on him in a polite way, but not nail him. And then on the other hand, I was also there for the Human Rights Cities Alliance to say how Atlanta was not a human rights city, but when he returns, we should work together and create a resolution and an ordinance to make Atlanta a human rights city. Because they in Atlanta wanted to be a human rights city to utilize it. So we used that state example, but we didn't just stop in your case of Ottawa. We went all the way down to the provincial level and went to Victoria Island, right? So we didn't even go just for, you know, we took it all the way. So we're like, great. The people in Atlanta want to be a human rights city. The mayor's here because they wanted to bring him. So let's utilize that. We can do something when we get home that advances what we care about, whatever that is. So you can see the UPR is just advancing whatever it is you really care about and just going through the motions, and you don't want to know everything about the UPR. That's fine. It's much better to think of it that way than it's a box exercise that comes from the global level that we have to do out of just because it's what we do every 4.5 years. We're looking to make the UPR work for you to be able to advance what you care about the most. And if it's at the local level that you think you can make more of an impact because your federal level is going to swing more towards Trump like ours, then that's what you need to do. And that's the same thing. Like there's certain things I can get done in Hawaii that I couldn't get done at the federal. So I'm going to do it here in Hawaii. And then it's my job, though, to make sure that it's not just a piece of paper and that then kids are actually eating food grown around the corner from Wailuku where I'm working. And I'm trying to create a honeybee farm on top and a pollen corridor. So I see this as part of the work in the mayor's office that how can I get the county of Maui to do much more right to food and right of nature because the UPR is happening and we might get recommendations from other countries as we'll get into in the interaction phase that really says what we need to do and will give good language that I can then suggest to county council member to maybe make local legislation, or as Metric brought up, change the farm bill in certain ways. So we use it at, that's why I said there's always 3 levels: community, capital, in your case, Ottawa, ours, DC, and global civil society. Because the truth is, there might be some amazing right to food and right to nature groups around the world that we can find in their UPR much stronger language that maybe we haven't dreamt up yet. And that's what it's always about. Is I see human rights as a floorboard that we should not go below. Certain rights are where they are, but it's also a horizon of where we aim and what more we can do, because we all know we produce enough food to feed everyone, and we all know that we could all be healthier. And I would rather be that way than me going, ooh, can I afford healthcare this year? You know, so it's we have to demand that, and the rights-based approach is just a stronger technique than a charity one. And I've seen many groups use the rights-based in a positive way. And I'll also, I see your email, Allison, and I think right to healthcare is definitely one that's there. And I have a great friend named Marnie and folks in Vermont that are working on that as well. And I'm going to put my email, since we're getting close to time. And my cell phone number, so you can text me. But that's some of the information. So any other questions? Ian, was that helpful?
Yes, thank you. That was great.
Perfect. I'm really excited. And I do a lot of work in Ottawa and do a lot of work with First Nations and Métis. So like if there's anything I can do to help with Canada reviews, it's always shocking how few people know the international mechanisms, considering how strong your civil society is. So it'd be an honor to help out.
Yeah, this is all new to me. This is fantastic.
Great. And we got the recording so we can utilize it after. Let me just get into interaction and briefly for the remaining 13 minutes, and then I'll just talk the one things we need to know. So interaction is exciting. Interaction is, this is when we reach out to every country in the world and find out what they care about, and then build a relationship with them. And not so much in our country, but in many countries, it's also one to move beyond like, hey, will you donate? Will you fund us? To we're partners. This is what we do. Respect us as partners, and let's do the important work that has to get done. This is that opportunity because we get to prove to them how we, civil society, are usually the most directly impacted, and more importantly, have the knowledge and the language of what has to happen and what should be going forward and what we can do. So that's one of the exciting things that we can look at. The other aspect is really getting to the point where we're creating the legislation, we're amending the bills, we are sharing what has to happen or change in a process. So we're, in a way, I see this as civil society's way to contribute to democracy and actually make a proactive, participatory public policy, which not enough people are involved in. Everybody barely votes, and then everybody hopes that the people we elect to do the right thing. Or in our case, that we all stand up and activate more than ever. And so that's our chance to look at that and to coordinate that. And that sees what we can do. So that's kind of exciting, and seeing how that is. And that's what the UPR is at its core. It's taking the people who know the most and saying, what do you want in it and how do we change it? And let's do that together. And the exciting part of that is we work at all 3 levels. At the community level, this is when we make the 1 to 2 pager. Like, you know, in the first phase, I said the most important document is your 10-page or your 5-pager. The most important thing in this is a 1 to 2 pager. This will be all you need for the rest of the time. Chelsea, if you were like, you know what, Josh, I'm kind of busy, I'm exhausted, but April 7th, I'm going to be good. I'm going to do the 1 to 2 pager part. I'm not doing the 5 to 10. That's absolutely fine. Because if you have the 1 to 2 pager, that's the issue, the smart question, and the recommendation. That's what we're going to take. And that's what I'll contribute to this group. I'll go to the UN with you. I'll be there at least 3 times before the UPR. And we will hand that to the government that you think agrees with your position the most and ask them to make the recommendation. So the coolest part is interaction between April 7th and November 9th. It is talking to governments around the world in as many ways as possible. So I'd love to really assist your group, coordinate activities and events, maybe just on certain themes. But there's 3 ways that I plan on doing it. Number 1, at something brand new. In cities where there's consulates, I'm planning on doing Atlanta, San Francisco, LA, Honolulu, meeting with consulates and saying, would you like to meet with Americans and share back to your capital what we think you should use in the UPR? The cool part is you're going to be educating consulates who don't know anything. They're going to be like, say, what? I didn't know about that. And we'll be like, yep, that's what's going on. So it's a great opportunity to do that. That's something that we can actually do. And I'm actually going to look up consulates right now because they were writing me here in Hawaii and seeing what we can do together. And her name's Midori. There we go. Midori is the one who wanted to meet. And I've been super busy, but now I'm going to write her right now because this is what we're doing. And we're going to reach out to if there is a consulate. And if not, no problem. We can decide where you do have members, where there is one, and coordinate one of those. More importantly, though, we're going to reach out to, in Washington, D.C., I'll work out a coordination plan where we host sessions at Howard Law, because Howard Law's Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Chair is coming out to visit me in February. We're going to organize events at Howard Law, at the law school, and UDC School of Law to meet with all the embassies in DC, inviting them to come hear from civil society about what matters most to us. So I'll come there to DC, I'll moderate, I'll meet with you in private, strategically after and before, but between April 7th and November, however many events you want to have in DC, I'll commit to being there to assist in whatever capacity you want me to, because I think this is one of the most important rights that we all have to work on. And then the other side is the UN angle, the global part. So New York is super close to you. We should organize meetings in New York with some of the civil society NGOs at the church center, maybe across the street, and invite all of those countries who care about these issues to meet with us. So we have 195 missions in New York that we can reach out to and invite to come to this important event. Oh, wonderful, Allison. That's great. You do have kind of a cool New York bookshelf and space right behind you. I wanted you to know. It definitely had to be New York or Georgetown, but I was going for New York. And so that's great. We can hang in NYC together, Allison. We can coordinate and we can do, you know, probably maybe 2 lunches, 1 breakfast, and invite them a couple of times. Maybe we do something around Earth Day would be, I think, a great one because it kicks it off, right? Rights of Nature, Earth Day, April 20th week. Let's plan for one where we invite all the governments to do that. And we invite them there. And then when other things are going on in Geneva, we do it in Geneva as well, because Geneva's good. But what we're doing is all those missions, this is what we're doing, right? You are a dream and you are the experts. Those governments care, but they're super busy. Now that I work in government, I can tell you we're super, extra bathroom. Awesome. Love Solidarity Housing. That is great. I will definitely stay there. And I'm really small, very quiet. Perfect. So we got housing taken care of already. There's the right to housing already taken care of, all organized in January already. And I'm good on subways, but I also walk. I love walking the whole city, getting my steps in, but watching the hustle bustle of the place and seeing all the people in New York is always great. So what we'll do is you are the most important piece of the UPR. because we're going to make it simple. We're going to spoon feed governments the most delicious yogurt they've ever had that you have cultivated, because you know the issue. They might care about it, but they can't know every country, right? They can't know what you know about what's going on in the United States. They don't know what metric just described on the food bill. So the coolest part is we're going to make it simple to them, but it's going to make them look super intelligent. So I'll be honest, when the UPR started, I was like, oh my God, what a waste of time. It's going to be like governments talking to governments. It's going to be like, I know we have vegetarians. I'm like a desertitarian. It'd be like Desserts Anonymous meeting, trying to tell each other to not eat the same amount of dessert, right? You're in you're in New York. You've got, oh my gosh, you've got all the cupcakes. You've got all those places. Every block has great things, you know. You have Leonida's chocolate down in Chelsea Market, you know. But if you and I are trying to say how we should stop eating dessert, we're going to all be really kind to each other because we all know what we really love eating and we know how hard it is. That's what governments was going to do to each other. I was like, oh, UPR is going to be horrible. It's going to be like, no, you're doing human rights good. No, you're doing human rights good. So what we learned, not by the third cycle, but by the third session, because there's 3 sessions a year, what we learned is they like to be champions, but they can't know everything about a country. So if we partner with them and we research and find the best countries who care about our issue, then it's the best conversations. But then they look like they're super smart because they send that back to their capital. So we met with them in New York, and the German mission sends everything back to Berlin. All of a sudden, they look like they're doing their job beyond belief because they have all these insights about the right to food that Berlin didn't. And when Berlin's drafting their question for the UPR, they're going to say, wow, the UN mission in New York did a great job. And they're going to be like, we did a great job. So, and some consulate who wants to someday be something more is going to be like, oh my God, we had this event and we did this, and this is super helpful and informative. So, and there's even a great cheat sheet I'll share with you. It's called UPR-info. And I can tell this is an advanced group. So all you do is look at UPR-info and look up the issue of right to food, right to farming, rights of nature, right to a clean, healthy, safe environment. And it'll give all of the questions that have ever been asked and all of the recommendations. So we can do that in our next training. We can go through UPR Info's website together. And Christina loves moving things, so she can be in charge of the website, and you can pull stuff off and she'll share screen, and then we can all look at it and go from there. And Brenda, it'd be great to work with you too. And oh, Karen, that's great. Alan Jenkins is a good friend of mine from Harvard Law, and he said he would do events for me in Hawaii, Martin Luther King Day, because it's his wife's birthday and their anniversary. But all I have to do is teach at Harvard Law sometime this spring, so we can do one in Boston, because Boston definitely has lots of consulates. So we can do one there. So already we've got a New York event and a Boston event, and we don't have that many cost because everybody already lives there. So we're doing super great. So I'm so happy we had this time together in our remaining 2 minutes. The last thing we're doing is just the issue, the question, the recommendation on 2 pages. And that's all we do, is whenever we have these meetings in Boston, in New York, in Geneva, in Honolulu, is we give them our wonderful questions and recommendations and share those with them. And we've done this before in Geneva, where we set up sort of a speed dating thing, because all human rights is relationships. And if anybody doesn't understand human rights law, I always tell them it's just like a relationship. It's the same thing. And there's treaties, and treaties are binding. So it's marriage, and declarations are more like we're just meeting each other and dating. But the whole point is we have mechanisms that allow us to make sure we mediate and make sure the marriage doesn't become dissolved, and we don't have more January 6s in the wrong way. And so this UPR is just one of the processes that allows us to connect with each other at the community, capital, and global civil society level, and create a culture of human rights for everyone. So I really do thank you for making time. And hopefully 2 hours went really fast, because it did for me too. And I really enjoyed all your questions and comments. And each one we do, though, we'll just get closer to where we're at, right? So the most important thing was exactly what Chelsea raised. We got 3 months. We have to write really good reports. But the cool part is, hey, guess what? If we run into some cool people on April 1st and April 2nd, no problem. We just bring them into that second phase of interaction and we help them do their 1 to 2 pager. You'll be ahead on your 1 to 2 pager because you've already written your report. So all you're going to do is scale it down. But then from April through, and you guys are fun, so let's just dream it all out. I'll do 5 minutes max more. The next phase, which no one knows about that I'm launching, is actually super cool. We're going to go from April 7th through July. We're going to do voluntary national reviews and voluntary local reviews with cities around the 17 global goals. We're going to just repeat exactly what we did from January to then, but we're going to use SDG language, because now on November 7th, after those recommendations are made and anything said November 7th in the third phase of consideration goes into a final report, they're going to match it with the SDG. So some people don't know, SDG sounds like something you don't want to catch from a training. And but they also are very much that economic, social, and cultural rights, which Metric pointed out is so crucial and that we have to push for even more. So US never did a voluntary national review. We're one of 5 countries. But Hawaii has done voluntary local reviews. Many cities have done voluntary local reviews. Ian, many provinces and cities in Canada have done those. We're setting up, and I'll coordinate with you, that we can have a voluntary local review, voluntary national review on the right to food and rights of nature, where mayors, but also people from each community will write a shadow voluntary local, voluntary national review on how they're implementing the 17 goals, which very much relate to food. We can use 13, 14, 15. We can use no poverty. SDG 1 is no poverty, zero hunger, good health, well-being. All those right there is yours. Then you got life on land, life on water. We can talk about phytoplankton and growing seaweed, everything else, right? Then we got 17 partnerships. So from April to July, ending with July 21 through 24, we'll do voluntary local reviews in New York City, where communities will talk to each other. And then from there, our interaction phase goes from end of July through November 10th, is SDGs, VLRs, VNRs, plus our 1 to 2 pagers. And all we're doing is working on the language of what's the question, what's the recommendation that we need to do. So super helpful. And that's what we'll coordinate going forward. Then the consideration, the exciting part is November 10th, we're going to wake up. We're going to take a deep breath and we're going to watch all of our questions get asked by all the countries that was brought up by your colleague there. Because all those countries will probably be our best allies because they have the strongest national legislation. And they would love to put it to the US and tell it how to be more like them. So we'll partner with them for the consideration. And then there's 2 sides. The US then will have from November 10th through March to say what they'll accept, what they reject. If they reject something, it just gives us more of a thing to push them on and coordinate a campaign around it. But we also can say it was a recommendation, and the truth is no local government or state government or Congress knows what those recommendations mean. So we can push our Congress people to host hearings, and I can organize around Senator Schatz and Senator Hirono to have an event to look at how we're going to implement the UPR recommendations, which could be between 400 and 500. So that in a way is a recipe book of what we need to do and how we can coordinate going forward. And then implementation after the adoption and sometime in March in 2026, then we go to implementation. And then the fun part is there's a midterm review, which the US has never done thoroughly. So we can be doing all these things all the time. Cool question is special rapporteurs in UPR. I can do that in a minute. Special rapporteurs can visit our countries, can visit our cities. I've organized many special rapporteur visits. So David Boyd is from Canada. I just worked with him at the ICJ advisory opinion. We were both on the People's Assembly to draft the final document. He used to be the special rapporteur on clean, healthy environment. I would invite him in a non-professional capacity to visit and then write about Hawaii. And then I could still use that to push my local officials to adopt what he wrote, because he was the expert on constitutional right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. So we can connect with any of those 44 special procedures and use them in a way. So they can only come on an official capacity if they're invited, but they don't have to. And I can get around that every different way and have done it in the worst countries. So like we said here, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Foods in Portland, Oregon, connected with as well on a couple of things. So we could organize an event with on the Right to Food Day, a couple of things, but we could do one thing a month to advance the UPR together and be as creative as we want to be. So we could unofficially invite the rapporteur to do a country tour, probably not before April, but probably before November, to talk about the issues that we think should be included, that they would unofficially be able to write anything they want that we could utilize with our local governments. So there are rules, but the important thing is to know those rules so we can bend them and use it to our best way. But I'll stop there. It's 9:05. I think we achieved it. And then the implementation phase is where we're at, which is where we're starting now. And you're just going to implement all the good language we've generated. And the exciting thing about the UPR is it's really a one-year campaign, a 15-month campaign. And that's not what normally you can do. Normally things are years and decades in the making. So it's a great way to get a lot of people to be involved who wouldn't want to sign up for a lifetime, but are willing to do a one-year campaign. And I look forward to working with you for this year on this campaign and into the future. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Joshua. We'll be sharing this recording because we know that there's some people who weren't able to make it. And we look forward to continued conversation and working relationship.